Hello everyone, dobro jutro, good morning. I have prepared several slides and certain points that I want to make, but since somehow I realized this morning that my experience when talking and working and researching diversity in the media is really British-centered. I live in Britain for 15 years, but since I'm in Rijeka, this wonderful city with lovely, beautiful people, I would invite you to, if you want, bring the local context. Also, I was thinking about the format, since I will be very critical about traditional mainstream media, whilst supporting the model of linear lecturing, I'm telling you what diversity in the media is. So if you want to break that, you're more than welcome. I'm going to argue certain points. If you don't agree, jump and tell me that I'm talking rubbish. To explain why my research and my work has been so UK-centered, maybe lies in the fact that I joined BBC World Service in 2004, coming from local radio B92. So when I joined BBC, one of the biggest impressions I had is that one of the main news editors that I worked with was blind. And in my mind, I thought, wow, this is really hopeful. If we can have news editors who are editing news and articles and radio pieces who's blind, then we are really on a good path to have a better inclusion and diversity, not only in the media content, but also in newsrooms. Well, my hopes didn't last long, and that's why if you have an impression that I'm critical of the BBC, it's because I know BBC better than other media organizations, but also because I think that public services media are the most important. Actually, journalism that lies in public interest might be the future, and we might do something to save it. So when we talk about diversity in the media, I would like to argue that implying certain ethical standards and also good governance, meaning better contracts for media workers, erasing, as far as we can, inequalities amongst media workers, might be our future. So first I'm going to give you a few figures and some examples about how diversity works or doesn't work, and then I'll offer you some solutions that my two organizations that I work for, Media Diversity Institute and Ethical Journalism Network, are kind of campaigning for. But what I would like to hear from you, maybe during this lecture or during the panel or afterwards or during the break, whether you think that these solutions are sustainable. I just came to Rijeka from the EU Media Days for Western Balkans in Podgorica, and the main talking point is sustainable business models. So in that context, having diversity and critique of public services and implying that the future lies in sustainable business models is somehow problematic. Okay, I'd like to start with my slide. Obviously, there are several researchers. So from time to time, you would have researchers that would measure how many male, how many female journalists, TV stars, what age you have to be to show up on a TV screen. And those researchers are really a reminder how horrible the situation is. So now I'm talking about European media. Mainly, I'm giving you figures here. Oops, this is BBC Newsroom and one of the black TV presenters. So obviously, if we move to analyze female TV presenters, I dare you to tell me whether there is anyone above 40. Okay, so BBC General Director Greg Dyke former BBC general director, had a saying that really kind of shook the public service broadcaster, that BBC is hideously white. After that, BBC got, it's called diversity strategy, that claimed that by 2020, by next year, they'll have 50% of workers, journalists, and other workers, employers, will be coming from different backgrounds than white and well-educated. So the problem why I'm stating this figure, it lies, I think, I believe, is in education, inequality, and a real class division when we talk about British society. Obviously, I will give you an example about Germany and Sweden, where education is free, but the situation is not better. So the real question is whether education and access to education is the key, and if we change that, whether we can have a better diversity and inclusion. So I'm going to argue here that lack of diversity in the media is just another representation of the elitistic structures of power. The key lies in contracts for media workers, and as I said, implying better ethical standards when we talk about professional journalism, but also changing and having better contracts for media workers. But that's obviously up to debate. So when you look at this figure, obviously I would ask what's happening with minorities. And I mean, to me, this is really astonishing. It's kind of unbelievable. There is a Muslim journalist working for Channel 4. I think that my British colleagues who are present here will know about whom I'm talking about here. And you would have that notion of her being covered, asking questions to our current Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, and him refusing to give her an answer. So we can ask whether having a Muslim covered TV presenter or journalist is really, is it just a show off? Is it a statistic? Is it, how do we say, positive quotes for diversity and inclusion? So that's also for us to debate. Gender pay gap. So this is a really a point about contracts and how women are paid. Again, I'm giving an example about the BBC because it's a public service. We all pay. It's our TV. It's our broadcaster. So we have right to raise our concern and to ask what's going on. When Carrie Gracie made a mess, discovering that she was paid 5 times less than her senior male colleagues, I thought that there will be a slight revolution amongst my former colleagues at the BBC. I thought BBC female journalists or employers would just walk out and will not produce content that day. Obviously, that didn't happen. The reason why it didn't happen is because they all have their agents. So if you want to work for the public service that is paid by taxpayers, you need to have actually a privately owned agency that will negotiate your contract with the BBC. And obviously you have these secrecy articles in the contracts that you can't break because negotiations about your salary are hidden, although it is public service. So I'm trying to make a point about how, not unfair, but how deeply tricky is to be a journalist and media worker today. Not only journalists and media workers. Obviously, I'm not excluding anyone here. Instead, for the problem of lack of diversity in the media, we are offered a monopoly game. As you said, the first game where women make more money than men. So this was the news in The Independent, The Guardian, Channel 4, I think. So you see, we are doing something for gender pay, monopoly game, which is obviously one of the shiny solutions that are given. That's why I gave the title of this lecture From Hashtags to BBC Crime Drama. You would have hashtags on all sorts of topics, and we get together on digital media, on social media, we feel empowered, we feel like we can change something, whilst it is just another trap, because as you know better than I do probably, all that is owned by big tech companies, and in a way we might lose that hope, because obviously big money came into the potentially free internet space for us to get together. I'm not very sure about this, because I can be on one day I'm pessimistic, on the other day I'm very optimistic. So today I think we lost that battle, but tomorrow I might be more optimistic when it comes to our getting together on digital platforms and really doing something to change the situation, and to have media that are more representative of our society. I thought when I started working on this topic, I thought it is like a mirror. Media should mirror the society, but instead it mirrors only its inequalities and bad situation, not only with lack of diversity in the content, but also in the newsrooms. That's another shiny, maybe positive step towards inclusion. But did you ever think about emojis or emoticons for people with disabilities? Maybe if there were people with disabilities amongst us, then they would notice that there's no emojis for them until Apple decided in March this year to include them on their new iPhones. Okay, so to be fair towards British society and British media, we talk a lot about diversity there. And there are groups, non-for-profit organizations and movements that are really doing work for diversity in the media. I also have a certain knowledge about other European media outlets. What I really don't know anymore is how the situation is here in Croatia and other countries of our region. So if you think that something that I'm saying is not applicable, jump in and tell me that the situation is different. I was talking to a friend just before we started, and I thought, well, what was the diversity last time I was here working for the media here? Diversity and inclusion was including Roma population in our stories about Roma population. But actually, I don't remember that everyone thought, do we have a Roma journalist who would report about new budget or classical concert? So there is also a trick that we would give kind of good tap on the shoulder when we have stories and content that is about minorities and marginalized groups, whilst we are not allowing them to come into our newsrooms and report on something that is not related to their community. So that's part of, I presume, media education and how you include aspiring journalists to become journalists in a diverse newsroom. It's up to debate what legislation and bills are going on and what initiatives we have here in the region and elsewhere in Europe. So as I said, in Germany and Sweden, the point I would like to make about that is, you know, reporting migration and anti-migration rhetoric has been in the media and it's been talked about a lot. But what is interesting that there is a considerable lack of people with non-middle class and migrant background in the media. So I'm stating now research that was done by Reuters Institute in Oxford, and the reason for lack of migrants in the media, given by editors and media managers is this: they don't have developed language skills enough. That's the problem. That's why we don't have them more in the newsroom. Some claim that family and culture played a role as well. When a family sacrifices a lot to move to a foreign country, they often prefer their children to engage in something that is seen prestigious and stable. For example, becoming a doctor or becoming a lawyer. So these are explanations, these are reasons given by people who are in charge of the media in Germany and Sweden. But I bet that the situation is similar here or in Britain. It's my favorite part. So obviously, I'm not going to explain what marginalized groups and who marginalized groups are, but there is a certain trend, I believe, in the media in Europe. We have our darlings when it comes to minorities. Guess who are they? Since I do work with minorities. For instance, I just came back from China where I worked with LGBT activists there and sex workers. That context is completely different. Although you cannot debate diversity in the media there, the level of engagement that LGBT activists are showing and the way of finding the way to connect on a controlled WeChat, they're amazing, they're amazing. But here, we would say, well, in Sarajevo, we had first successful pride, a gay pride. Hooray, well for us. Well reported. It was 2 days, a media for 2 days full of reports about gay pride. And that's it. It's just a news report about the event. I didn't see in any traditional Bosnian outlet the question about how homophobic is Bosnian society, let alone editors who are editing the media outlets. Okay, so I'm claiming here that there is a difference in treatment that the minority group receive. For instance, trans and binary people receive a horrible treatment by the British media. And now I'm basing this claim on the research, so it's not just my impression. So The Guardian, Times, Channel 4, they're doing a horrible job when it comes to trans people. I'm not mentioning here Daily Express, The Sun, Daily Mail, all the tabloids, obviously. They've changed the rhetoric a little bit when it comes to anti-racist narratives, anti-homophobic, anti-Islamophobic, because they would be, how shall I say, criticized, or they would enter a discussion where they would be criticized for supporting those narratives. And then you can see, for instance, it's very obvious when it comes to reporting of Daily Mail, how they've changed the way they were reporting about migrants after that photo of Alan Kurdi, a small Turkish guy, boy who died on a, not Turkish, he was Syrian, but the photo was on a Turkish beach. So when I think you know what I'm talking about. So the day after the photo surfaced, Daily Mail changed the narrative. So there weren't any more people coming to steal our job, but we show empathy. Migrants are suffering. But when it comes to trans people, it's a little bit more difficult. Okay, so one of the report's key findings is that the most common transphobic narrative in the British media is spreading fear and disinformation about the proposed changes to the Gender Recognition Act. So I'll just explain quickly what it means. So countless articles argue that these changes will make it easier for trans women to access single gender spaces put cisgender women at risk. Why? The proposed changes will scrap the intrusive and psychologically harmful examination process transgender individuals currently face to obtain gender recognition certificate. Instead, trans individuals will be able to self-identify as trans. Apparently, this will lead to masses of predatory males pretending to be transgender in order to enter these spaces. So this is the narrative that's been circulated in the, not British tabloids, in the mainstream so-called professional serious media outlets such as Independent or The Times. Okay, so now that I've given many examples, and my time is, yeah, I'm already talking a lot. So now, well, the problem is there. I gave you some kind of notion of how deep it goes. It would be fair of me to offer some solutions. I am not sure that those solutions, how shall I say, they can be very successful, but at least I believe we have to try. So I already mentioned that professional, inclusive, fair journalism, media content, and the structure, how we media workers organize ourselves, lies in ethics. So in terms of ethical standards, how we report on minorities, how do we include people with disadvantaged background, people that are different or other? Do we have space to let them into our media? It's up for debate. But also, I believe, and those organizations that I work for, we believe that you cannot have ethical professional media if you don't have good contracts, if you don't have good governance within the media outlet, which means everyone is equally paid, male and female. Also, you take care about people that you employ. You take care that your newsroom reflects the society, not necessarily in the same percentage. So if you have 9% of black people, as it is in Britain, then you don't have to have only 9 people of black people working for the media. So I'm not claiming that. There is an initiative on a global level called Journalism Trust Initiative. And 2 weeks ago, we published its editorial guidelines that is up for debate and public comments, where we state different ways of reporting on minorities and excluded groups, not only to have them included, but also not to repeat the same mistakes as we have now. In this lecture, I wanted to talk more, but I wasn't sure whether to claim that digital platforms and social media are not safe space. I don't know if you will safe space for minorities and for better diversity. I'm not sure whether you will agree with me or not, but maybe we can talk about it later or on the panel, on your amazing panel. And at the end, sometimes I believe obviously there are people that really care about those issues, and sometimes they work within the structure and with the structure of the power that kind of remain resilient towards the same structure. So here I have the example about BBC crime drama, that sometimes you would notice in the drama program of the BBC having certain issues that you wouldn't have discussed in the main news bulletins or news program. So for instance, when BBC, obviously, I'm not going to comment on Luther, but Undercover is a BBC crime drama that for the first time in its history have two leading roles given to black people. And it's its public service in the UK, the country where I can talk about these things and I can say things. I'm not sure whether, for instance, in Serbia, where I'm coming from, we would ever have main Roma actor, and it is not given that Roma community actor who would have a lead role. And I'm not talking about Kusturica anyway. So it is for us to think about the ways to change that, and whether there are kind of quick fix, such as, okay, let's have two black actors and produce a crime drama, or whether we need to look deeper and go back to education, to the access, to the way that we organized our societies, and why we are so unequal in any way. That's from me for now. If you have any questions or you don't agree with anything that I've said, please tell me. Thank you.
Where did some of those shocking race statistics come from? The Muslim, 0.4%?
Yeah.
BBC or that's general?
No. These are researchers. For instance, I was stating Reuters Institute at Oxford University. So they have, their research was published in May this year. The findings about Muslim population and male population is from City University, 2017 was published. And I have them all here, so I can share, yeah.
Does that also include freelancers or just people who have contract workers too, or is it?
So in that research made by City University, employers were included. But in Reuters, they include freelancers, yeah. And also foreign correspondents, I think. It is just, it's shocking, yeah. And I mean, for me, maybe the most shocking is that the 94% of male. So now obviously BBC and its diversity strategy, I feel so unfair now that I'm criticizing BBC, but really it's public service. So it's kind of, you know, it's mine. I pay for it. So I have right. It's taxpayers funded. It's independent, they claim, from the state and the government. But having 94% of male journalists is just unbelievable. Yeah.
Now, to shift from the representational issue of having such and such faces on the screen, or having or so many people in the streets of Sarajevo, to the actual editorial policies, all the way up to the Constitution. You know what I mean? So where the true power handles lie. The representational level, this finding can be cosmetically improved quite easily.
Yeah.
The quotas can be relatively easily improved, but when it gets really stubborn, it's the editorial policies, just like the laws of the country. So are the editorial policies, the written and the non-written ones, of course. Have you investigated, or is there any investigation that would map these deeper layers of power structures or mechanisms in terms of all of these exclusions?
Yeah. I'm not aware of any research being done, researching and looking deeper into what you just mentioned. But since you asked me now, and now I'm just going to give you my personal opinion, so not to be related with organizations that I work for. So I think that the real problem is actually in the system, because media, the parliament, institutions as such, they're all in one big hub, and we all rely on each other. if I have good sources in the government, I'm going to be a good journalist, and my editor might put me on a TV screen and people will recognize me on the street, which serves my ego and vanity. But if I don't have those structures, and now I'm slightly claiming deconstruction, not only of stereotypes and negative representation, but if you deconstruct those structures, if you deconstruct, if you like, democracy as we know it, contained within the elections and the parliament, then we might have a different approach to including others and including minorities and actually including others, having better diversity. It's a little bit problematic, but I'm ready to talk to you afterwards and explain more what I think. But, you know, I think that the problem is is deeper. We have to go back. Voting is a process. Elections.
It's more the feeling of it. I'm not an expert.
Yeah.
True that there probably are white senior males sitting somewhere back in the editorial rooms. If not, then one level higher up or deeper down.
Yeah.
Just like in the politics.
Yeah.
You know, the economy, the corporations are in politics, by and large.
Yeah.
Even if all of those representatives are sitting in all those seats.
Exactly.
So how to tackle, how to measure, how to map, how to make this more transparent and change it.
As long as I know, they all get jobs after they finish colleges and universities. Even here, you know, you need to know someone who knows someone. Or if you are editor of a newspaper in Rijeka and you are a very good friend of mine, I mean, it's in our tradition that I give you a call and ask whether I can send my son, for instance, for internship. That's how things are done. Not only here in the region, everywhere. You know, I mean, the very nature of social networks is we are connecting, we are making networks because we feel familiar or we know something or someone. And that's our comfort zone. So that's how we actually perpetuate those problematic trends. Yeah.
So, while training all around the world, do you have some success stories? I mean, not success stories we solve the problem, but examples of good practice that is implemented after this.
I like one example when I was working in Morocco and Algeria and Arab countries, and I would come to the training, bringing all newspapers and say, look now, we're going to count male and female only photos and pictures. And there was a kind of good, shocking, as Alicia said, shocking thing. But then after 5 days of working only with female radio journalists, they were all covered. In Algeria, the trend is the younger you are, the more conservative you get. We were working only on producing content related to women's issues. So because it's such a small group and kind of very narrow topic, we managed to have amazing stories. And I'm very proud of a girl who stood up and said, you know that I'm a feminist and I'm a lesbian. And I said, yeah, but homosexuality in Algeria is illegal. So you cannot produce an interview with a lesbian. She said, yes, I can. Okay, let's do it. So she did it in a way that it's not so transparent, but the girl, who's a lesbian, was featured on a radio, on a local radio. So that's a successful story. It was many years ago, but yeah.
You talked about reporting about Roma population in our region, and you mentioned that one strategy could be bringing members of Roma community as journalists to mainstream newsrooms.
Yeah.
Other strategy could be giving public funds specifically to members of the Roma or persons with disabilities, to certain minorities to develop their minority media. The problem with this is that this often ends up as like
Segregated, yeah.
But we have
Segregation.
in Croatia a super successful example, Ilić Novosti, that was actually financed with the funds for the development of Serbian Okay, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But their success succeeded to change narrative on national mainstream.
It's a very good question. I know about news portal from Leicester in the UK that was found by migrants, and not migrants from Middle East, but migrants after 2004. You know, many Romanians, Bulgarians, Polish came to Britain. Everyone was so scared. So they found a news portal, and the business model was sustainable because they relied on local news, local content, and local advertisers. And now they became like an example of how, in a way, to save local or community media in the UK. Another example, but they don't have the who will do that. So now someone decided that to save community and local media in the UK, they should receive some public funds. But the question was, who will decide to whom to give public funds? So now you have to create a body, like to have a certifier for certifiers. Like, you know, who will be that high judge? So I don't have many successful examples, actually. Maybe, yeah, this migrant, yeah. But we need to believe, right? Okay, thank you, thank you, thank you.